So what I hope to do in this talk on alchemy is to give you a different perspective on who we are and what our purpose on this planet might be. Last night's talk showed us the immensity of the ground to which we belong, that I call soul with a capital S, but there is more to understand that I hope to share with you today. And in this beautiful image from Chartres Cathedral, Christ sits in the center of the mandorla or vesica piscis. He presents not only the image of a cosmic being who has incarnated on this planet to offer a path of reconnection to the divine ground, but an image of the sacredness of the whole of creation and the divinity that is present within each one of us. The fully awakened and enlightened man and woman we have the power to become, recovering our true identity as cosmic and galactic beings. This great image calls us to awaken to a higher level of consciousness, and in the words of T.S. Eliot's great poem, Ash Wednesday, to redeem the unread vision in the higher dream. So this talk is about the transformation of the base metal of our consciousness into gold. It's about the process of the soul's transformation and reunion with the divine ground, so that all of us can begin the work of redeeming the unread vision in the higher dream. In these days together, we've looked at two of the three phases in the evolution of consciousness, the lunar and the solar. And now we need to become aware of the third phase, what I call the stellar phase of consciousness, that is the starry phase. We can see where we've come from and gain some insight into where we are going. In the final phase of the evolution of consciousness, mind and soul are reunited after their long separation, and we can enter into conscious participation with an ensouled and awakened universe that is alive and intelligent. Now, this is a quote from Kepler, who was the man with Copernicus who changed our image of the old image, which was that the Earth was moving around the sun. Sorry, the other way around. The sun moving round the Earth to the Earth moving round the sun. Hope I've got it right now. And Kepler wrote this. He said, "There is nothing I want to find out and long to know with greater urgency than this. Can I find God, whom I can almost grasp with my own hands in looking at the universe, also in myself?" This was quite something to have written at that time, when it would have been totally heretical to make such a statement. Alchemy is the science of transformation, whether of material substances, of nature, or of human beings. It's about the refinement of human nature. It is a method of self-discovery. Because it was a threat to orthodoxy, it had to be kept secret. And that beautiful figure on the right is the alchemist wearing the robes, the red robes and the purple robes of the final completion of the great work. And all around you'll see flowers, birds, and animals. And that's very important because they always included nature in their images. And
what's the black ribbon?
That has an inscription on it, which I don't have to tell you because it's very difficult to read. They think that this manuscript was made by a man who lived in Augsburg in around 1510. I've got the book of Splendor Solis from which it comes, and it's absolutely marvellous. And they've just found, they thought it was from Nuremberg, the man who made it, but they think it's now from Augsburg, the same place as that first picture came from. So here we have these two images again of the greatest teachers of humanity who represent the awakened state that is a potential within all of us. In India, the path to the awakened state is called Nagayuna, the path of the serpent, Naga being the word for serpent. This is the origin of Kundalini Yoga, which goes back to Vedic times and is many thousands of years old. This Buddhist sculpture from Thailand, which is a picture that I collected on my first journey through the Far East from that museum in Thailand. I've had it all these years, since 1956. It's exquisitely beautiful. It carries forward the ancient Vedic tradition of raising the immense creative power of life within us from a state of unconsciousness to a state of fully awakened or illumined consciousness. The teaching of Christ aimed to show the path to awakening that he himself embodied, as he's shown here rising out of the tomb with the sleeping soldiers beneath his feet, unaware of what is happening above their heads. So there have been 4 concepts of spirit. First of all, spirit is present in every aspect of the phenomenal world. What we were talking about at lunch, about Bali, where everything is sacred still. So it was really known in the Vedic culture of India and also the lunar cultures of the Great Mother. And it was just born with children. They just grew up with this feeling that they were in a sacred world. Secondly, spirit emanates from a divine source, a divine father and mother, both transcendent and immanent or present in the world. Now, alchemy and Kabbalah kept alive the idea that spirit was the ground of all living things, and those are the only 2 traditions in the West that I know of that did this. In the East, it was different because it was always kept alive in India. Thirdly, we have spirit is wholly transcendent, which is the patriarchal image of God. And finally, that spirit does not exist, which is the modern secular belief of scientific rationalism or reductionism. So once, long ago, in the lunar culture of the Great Mother, spirit was not outside us, we were within spirit. All of life was spirit. Spirit was the air we breathed, present within every aspect of life that we experienced. And it is this utterly different perspective on life that we've lost. Yet it still lives deep within our soul. Alchemy kept this alive for us for over 4,000 years, and we are recovering it now. As I mentioned in my book, many years ago I had a dream that led me to a new understanding of spirit, that spirit was present in all that we call life. I dreamt that I was in a rocky wilderness above the tree line. Suddenly I heard a voice crying, "Help me, help me." I looked around and could see no one. Then I looked down at my feet and realized that the voice was coming from a stone and from a small leather pouch lying on the ground. I picked it up and opened it, and inside there was a small stone. This dream led me to alchemy, which was and is about rescuing the neglected aspect of spirit that is hidden within matter, nature, and ourselves. And I suddenly realized that my talk last night was actually an alchemy in the alchemical tradition of rescuing spirit within matter. That's a real shivery shock. Amazing that I was able to do that and give it out to people. So we participate in a cosmic consciousness or intelligence which is co-inherent with every particle of our being and every particle of matter. God or spirit or divine mind is not something transcendent to us. We are co-inherent with it, at the very heart of it. Spirit that has been so long projected onto a transcendent creator remote from our world is the quintessential consciousness which is awaiting discovery both in nature and in our nature. I think this is one of the great revelations of our time as it gradually gets through into the culture. And we have the extraordinary responsibility of helping spirit to become conscious in this material level of reality, to become conscious within our soul in all the different ways that each one as an individual can do this. All cosmic life is an alchemical process of birth, death, and regeneration. Although the gradient for the increase of consciousness in humanity is so slow and so arduous, we are all participating in and contributing to a stupendous cosmic great work. This is something the alchemists understood and was the foundation of all their work. So they said this: study what thou art, whereof thou art a part. All that is without thee also is within. Isn't that amazing? Now they said that within manifest life is a hidden reality of the highest order. Within manifest life there is a hidden reality of the highest order. The cosmos calls us to become aware that we participate in its life, that everything is sacred and connected, that the cosmos has a soul, and that we can learn how to communicate with that soul. There has always been a chain of teachers, known as the Golden Chain, or Catena d'Oro, who have transmitted their knowledge and insight from generation to generation over thousands of years. Two great streams of alchemical knowledge, one which flowed from Egypt, and the other from Persia, Arabia, and Islamic Spain, came together in Europe in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. There are some 7,000 known texts of alchemy, and some of them are exquisite beauty, each built on a library of older texts from different cultures. Some are concerned with the processes of the chemical transformation of metals, from which arose the modern science of chemistry. Others were focused on a process of transformation which takes place within the human psyche, or soul, that was reflected in the changing material in their retorts, or vessels. So alchemy is basically, as I've said before, the science of transformation, whether that process is focused on transforming metals or transforming human consciousness. It was also concerned with the relationship between what was happening in the cosmos and what was happening on Earth, between what they call the above and the below. So the study of astrology was also part of the alchemical great work. There were some 4,000 alchemists working in Europe between 1200 and 1650, and with the invention of printing, the dissemination of alchemical texts spread like wildfire throughout Europe. Many alchemists were Kabbalists and vice versa. This image is a Kabbalistic one, where two men are sharing a vision of the higher worlds. In the central circle are the zodiacal signs. You can hardly see them, but they may be just visible. They're the different levels of the planets and the planetary orbits. So the great work of alchemy is about the relationship between man and the cosmos, the creation of an immortal body of light, the integration of body, soul and spirit, and the conscious reunion with the unus mundus, or the divine ground of being. The unus mundus means one world, and that was the name the alchemists gave this divine ground. So they knew that it was one world. There is no doubt that the alchemists had remarkable dreams and visions, possibly assisted by taking hallucinogenic drugs, since they had a knowledge of the property of herbs and plants. I'm sure they practiced some form of meditation. In paying close attention to these visions and dreams, they kept alive the ancient shamanic traditions of the lunar era. They saw their work as connecting them to a hidden dimension of reality, engaging in dialogue with it, and being transformed by the relationship with it. In doing this, they believed they were creating what they called an immortal body, a body of light, in which they would live after their death. They also believed that life had the intention to evolve, and that they could assist this process by working with nature, freeing their own consciousness from the dross of habits and beliefs that impeded the unfolding of this evolutionary intention. So they taught that hidden within man there exists a heavenly and divine light, which cannot be placed in man from without, but must emerge from within. Alchemy talks about the philosopher's stone, and the alchemists explain what this is. So they said, our gold is not the common gold. There are two categories in this art, namely, seeing with the eye and understanding with the heart. And this is the hidden stone, which is fitly called a gift of God. And this divine stone is the heart and tincture of gold which the philosophers seek. So what is the treasure that has been ignored or overlooked? And what is the gold that is not the common gold? The great work of alchemy tells us that we have our origin in the starry ground of the cosmos, that we are literally star life in every cell of our being. The whole of cosmic and planetary evolution is an alchemical process, an ongoing process of creation and transformation, of dissolution and regeneration. So the cosmos calls to us to be aware that we participate in its life, that everything is sacred and connected, one life, one source, one spirit. The great work of alchemy refines the base metal of our understanding, so that we, evolved from the fiery substance of the stars, can know ourselves as spirit. It heals the deep wound in the human soul that has come into being because of a sense of alienation, loneliness and separation from the divine. It tells us who we are and why we are here. Now, alchemy is called the royal art. Why? Because each one of us carries latent within us the royal value, the greater, finer, more complete or whole person we are capable of becoming, symbolized by the mysterious stone or gold of the alchemists. Alchemy is a process of revelation, incarnation, illumination, and transfiguration. And this is the meaning of the vision of the Grail that the medieval knights used to set off in quest of. The Grail itself is an image of the divine feminine. So alchemy is the science of transmuting the base metal of the pre-conscious soul into the gold of the awakened soul that is reunited with its cosmic ground. The emphasis is on building awareness of and communion with spirit, and creating this incorruptible body of light, or subtle body, that will hold this relationship beyond the death of the physical body. Alchemy is not merely an art or a science to teach metallic transmutation, so much as a true and solid science that teaches how to know the center of all things, which in the divine language is called the spirit of life. Alchemy is a gradual process of attunement to the higher dimension of spirit. This can only be gradual. You can't suddenly leap into the dimension of spirit. It may take many lifetimes. We see only the physical universe, but what about the invisible 96% that we can't see, that I was talking about last night? That painting is by my husband, by the way. It's very beautiful. So alchemy through a rainbow bridge between matter and spirit, holding the connection between the seen and the unseen, the above and the below. So the alchemist said, "Whoever shall make the hidden manifest knoweth the whole work." And that is what we've come to now in that talk last night, making the hidden manifest. So much of what they discovered is coming into consciousness now at this time of our awakening. The hidden is becoming manifest. So alchemy flows beneath the surface of Western civilization like a river of gold, preserving its images for us so that we might one day understand our presence on this planet better than we do. Here is a beautiful image of the alchemist following in the footsteps of nature, holding in his hand a lantern which signifies the light of the spirit shining in the darkness, and wearing goggles to give him special sight or insight. I will show you many other beautiful images of this process. So the great work of alchemy is about recovering the lost sense, the lost lunar sense of participatory awareness, the lost sense of relationship with all creation. It's about reanimating the poetic vision, the imaginative sensibility that once connected us to nature and the cosmos. At the same time, because of the last 4,000 years, it's about growing into our unique individuality, differentiating ourselves from the values that presently control the political and religious life of humanity, living from a different perspective on life without seeing oneself as superior to other people or forcing one's views upon them in an evangelical way. Now, where Christianity taught that the Redeemer is outside us and that our ultimate redemption as Christians has been assured by Christ's sacrificial death, alchemy taught that the alchemist can become the redeemer or rescuer of the lost aspect of spirit hidden within himself and nature, working with spirit to accomplish its awakening within him. And this gives great significance to the individual, since the divine drama of redemption is consummated in and through us. It's an awesome and heroic task, so each one of us carries the mystery of the incarnation of spirit in this dimension. Alchemy is a sacred rite of unification, an opus divinum, which ultimately reveals or brings to birth the innate divinity of man and woman. Now, alchemy gives us many images of an aging king who has to die in order that his son may rule in his stead. And we can identify the old king, the king who needs to die, with the deficient values and belief systems that currently rule our world, that have ruled it for millennia. In relation to the individual, the old king personifies a consciousness that knows nothing of its deeper ground. We can also identify the old king with an outworn image of spirit that needs to be relinquished in order for a new image to emerge from the depths of the soul. Just as from time to time we have to buy new clothes to replace worn-out ones, so an image of spirit which has long presided over a civilization or a culture may need to be discarded in order for spirit to be reborn in new form. This is, next one of the most beautiful pictures in this sequence of pictures. The most beautiful of all alchemical texts, with 22 superb illustrated pages, is called the Splendor Solis, the Splendor of the Sun. It is one of the greatest treasures of the British Library, and I've held a facsimile there in my hands. It was painted by a man who probably lived in Augsburg in the early 16th century. There is a text that accompanies this image which says, "The king's son lies in the depths of the sea as though dead, but he lives and calls from the deep. Whosoever will free me from the waters and lead me to dry land, him will I prosper with everlasting riches." So there is in the background, I think the old king is disappearing into the waters and the young king has emerged from them. And there he is holding the scepter and the orb and the crown on his head and the sun in the sky, but also a star, which is one of the images of alchemy and of awakening. So the king's son in the text and in this picture personifies the different consciousness and values that are generated by a deeper communion with spirit, not deeper beliefs, but deeper communion. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was the young king who brought potential renewal to the culture of that time and the possibility of a transformation of our values. 500 years before him, the Buddha did the same for his culture in India. And St. Francis was to do the same for 13th century Italy. In the last century, Sri Aurobindo, Father Bede Griffiths, and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin were three of the great transformers in that century that challenged the values of the old king. Also, Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, of people in this century, have been also standing for those new values. So the young king you can find in all sorts of different people, like Mother Teresa, for instance. Alchemy sets its supreme quest in the context of a marriage between the solar and lunar aspects of the soul, the fiery gold of the masculine solar element and the volatile silver of the lunar feminine one, a union between our head and our heart, between our rational consciousness focused through thinking and our instinctive consciousness focused through the heart, through intuition and feeling. This marriage also ultimately unites the invisible dimension of the subtle world with the visible world of our experience. So what this whole process amounts to is not only a transformation, but a revelation. Now there are 7 major themes in alchemy. which are related to the major themes of mythology in the Bronze Age that I spoke to you about, those great myths of the descent of Inanna and Isis rescuing the parts of Osiris. So there's a descent into the underworld and the return. And those of you who might have read the story of Aeneas, the 6 books of his story, that is about his descent into the underworld and return. The struggle with a superhuman adversary, a dragon or a monster, like Theseus' encounter with the Minotaur. Death and rebirth or regeneration. The winning of a priceless treasure, usually guarded by the great dragon or the serpent. Transformation, the sacred marriage, and the birth of the divine child, the fruit of that union. And the 7 tasks of alchemy are to rescue the aspect of spirit that is lost in matter, the process of transformation that's involved in this rescue, because you can't rescue unless you yourself are transformed, the death of the old king and queen, and the birth of the young king and queen, which is the new and integrated solar and lunar consciousness. The union of the 2 natures, the hermaphrodite, the conscious union of body, soul and spirit, and finally the reunion with what the alchemists call the unus mundus, or the divine ground. Now, there was an alchemist called Rulon the Lexicographer in the 16th century who said, "Imagination is the star in man, the celestial and supercelestial body." Imagination is the star in man, the celestial and supercelestial body. For the alchemists, the imagination is much more than a faculty. It is a psychic reality, almost like a subtle body or field that we tune into when we create from the deepest level. Think of Chartres Cathedral and what the masters of the compasses, as they were called, who built it, tuned into. It is like another dimension which interpenetrates our dimension and interacts with it. It seems to act as a bridge between the visible and invisible worlds. It seems to be the very ground of our consciousness, something which underlies the physical reality we perceive with our 5 senses, yet cannot be perceived by them, although it can be sensed by them. So now we come to the roses. And what was called the lesser work, which is the creation of the white stone or white rose. Alchemy defines 3, sometimes 4 stages in the great work of transforming our consciousness and bringing forth the stone or gold. This process is circulatory and continuous and moves through the different phases over and over again. You don't reach the goal in one and that's finished. You repeat over and over again, rather in a spiral format. So the whole process is about the slow expansion of consciousness, about deepening our connection with the subtle field of the soul. And the stages of the lesser work are governed by fire and water, the transformative fire and the cleansing, clarifying waters of the soul. So this lesser work is the first stage, which is about separating the soul from the body. That is, separating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche so that the conscious aspects become aware that there is a deeper aspect to be explored and discovered. So the first stage of the lesser work is the nigredo or separatio, and it's a phase of death and dissolution with recurring depressions, which they called a blackness blacker than black. And anyone who's been in depression knows that it's a blackness blacker than black. Then there's also the encounter with the dragon in this phase, that is to say, all the patterns that I explained in my second talk that have the primordial habits of the instinct, which have got stuck, so to speak, in aggression and all that kind of thing, which have to be transformed. And the symbol of this phase is the raven. The alchemist saw the nigredo or separatio as the state of blind suffering and ignorance before the dawning of awareness. And this is what we've been in for 4,000 years. They also called it the unio naturalis, meaning the state where we live from day to day, responding blindly to events as they happen, where we believe we have control of our lives but are actually the victim of events and of the complexes and beliefs and archaic drives and habits which control us. So in this state, the spirit is not awake, not free, but is a prisoner or victim of all these things. To awaken from this state involves the separation of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche that have been bound together in a kind of incestuous union, where the conscious mind or ego that has emerged from the matrix of nature is still unconsciously bound to it. So the nigredo is the phase of the ego's dying and death as it gives up its illusion of supremacy, power, and the need for control, and becomes aware of a deeper dimension of the psyche, which may come as a great shock to it. Often in analysis, people are in great state of denial. They don't want to know about the unconscious. It's frightening. And to go down into it is even more frightening. So it also involves the encounter with the dragon or the primordial instincts that I talked about in the talk on the solar era. It's a becoming aware of how one may be governed and controlled by these instincts and learning how to disengage from their power to control us. So separatio involves conflict, suffering, depression, bewilderment. The original sense of the oneness and autonomy of our being is split into two. Yet paradoxically, this work of differentiation is the first stage of reuniting the conscious solar aspect of the psyche with the instinctual lunar soul. Unless you go through this phase of separatio, you don't actually know how to bring the two together, because you don't know there are two to start with. So in very graphic imagery, the alchemists showed this process of transformation. The fire of transformation burns and transforms all the dross in our nature until the unconscious state of fusion with our instincts is transmuted into a higher and more conscious form. The strange male-female form shown here is called the rebus, an intermediate state before the formation of the hermaphrodite. It is an image of what the alchemists call the first conjunctio, or union, when the previous unconscious state is differentiated into two separate yet conjoined units. Here the rebus is undergoing the extremely painful process of burning away the dross that has hidden the gold of the spirit. It is being whitened in the fire and turned to ashes. Fire in this phase is the main agent of transformation. Now, in relation to your own lives, it could be the fire of grief, the fire of bereavement, the fire of loss, the fire of losing jobs or material possessions, or in the refugee situation, it's the fire of being driven from your home and having nothing, like those poor immigrants coming on the boats. That is the fire of transformation in its initial stage. Collectively, humanity in the last century and this one has been going through a terrible calcinatio. We have witnessed the images of incineration in the gas ovens of Auschwitz, the firebombing of Dresden, the obliteration of Hiroshima, death by napalm, depleted uranium and white phosphorus and barrel bombs filled with lethal chemicals, the horrific fiery destruction of the Twin Towers, the ruthless bombing of houses and cities in Bosnia and Syria and elsewhere. Millions of helpless civilians have died in these tragic events and are still dying. And this will go on until the world's consciousness is transformed. The alchemist said that no new life can arise without the death of the old. Here we have an image of the descent into the grave, or the underworld of the psyche, and the emergence of the transformed initiate. We see the sowing of the seeds that will be transformed into the green shoots of regeneration. This image actually goes back to Egypt and the annual return of the dismembered god Osiris in the form of the wheat that grew from the mud deposited on the banks of the Nile. There are many other images in this picture which I don't have time to go into, but they're all images of transformation. There's the presence of the raven on the right. There are different graves in the background. There's a target with archers. They're all explaining this huge process of transformation. Here is another image of a beheaded man lying on the ground, dismembered, like Osiris again, and the red man holding the golden head and holding a sword. We can know that after the experience of dying and dismemberment, there will be regeneration, and that is signaled by the boat coming in on the right there in the distance. So dismemberment is an image of the death of the ego, letting go of old beliefs and changing the patterns of behavior in which the life spirit has become imprisoned or entangled or buried. It's about undoing the structure that we found ourselves in by trying to adapt to our culture and its beliefs and values, which were imprinted on us in childhood and during our education. Psychic growth is a very painful process for the ego or the conscious mind, and this image of dismemberment reflects it. But again, you see the beautiful border around the edge, which symbolizes bringing oneself into relationship with nature and the flowering of nature within us. And I think you'll see a butterfly there on the right. The melancholia and suffering of the alchemist is also the anguish of spirit itself, undergoing the travail and pain of sacrifice and transformation. Spirit suffers with us in the agonizing experiences of our own lives, because we are part of spirit. Both we and spirit are participating in a cosmic passion play. The longer we remain unconscious, the more our suffering is prolonged. So now we come to the second stage, and you can see why nothing can change in the world unless it changes in the individual. It really depends on the individual's going down to do this work and transforming his or her own psyche. But many people are doing this. So the second stage is called the albedo, of the first part is called the albedo or solutio. It's about opening the heart. It's about the shedding of tears and the dawning of illumination, insight and wisdom. And its symbols are the queen, the moon, moonlight, the white stone or white rose, the lily, the dove and the swan. These are all images of the feminine, you'll notice. So the albedo is the phase of baptism or immersion in the watery womb of the soul. Down in the depths is this watery womb. It's a process of washing, cleansing, purifying, and seeing more clearly. Many tears are shed. It is the dawning of the light of insight and wisdom. The alchemist compared this stage to the gradual whitening of the sky after the darkness of night, and also to the moon or moonlight. It's about the awakening of the feminine lunar principle, the moonlight, the awakening of the heart, of compassion for oneself and for the suffering world. Don't forget, one has to have compassion for oneself in this work. It's about dissolving rigid, fixed beliefs, melting the snow and ice of frozen feelings, releasing the pain of buried trauma. Feeling is then released like a fountain from the depths of the soul, and it will seek expression in life in some form. In this phase comes the discovery of unknown potential, what we were talking about yesterday, gifts, possibilities, softness, fluidity, relatedness and compassion, all aspects of the feminine. It's about integrating the shadow, both the latent and unknown creative aspects of the shadow and the destructive aspects as a result usually of deep wounds to the heart. And if you look back over that 4,000 years history, when you think of how many hearts were wounded by death, sacrifice, burning at the stake, told to do things that you didn't want to do, and being held in a really dreadful culture. But despite all of that, there was creativity of extraordinary quality going on by the painters and the artists and the sculptors and the architects. They managed to escape this and create marvelous things in spite of this terrible time. So the alchemist sits in the tub here, while an assistant uses the bellows to increase the fire and the heat. The dove of the Holy Spirit rests on his head. Water washes, cleanses, renews, and fire burns, purifies, and transmutes. and by these processes the primal matter of our psychic life is refined and cleansed and rendered more subtle and translucent to the ground of spirit. By these methods the quintessential gold of the spirit emerges from beneath the rust or verdigris that has accrued to it over the millennia of human evolution. The passionate intensity of devotion to the work, or to one's own creative work, is the fire that transforms, the fire which derives from spirit itself. Here's my favorite picture of a dark man who carries in his limbs the three colors of the alchemical process, the black, the red, and the white on his left hand there, emerging from the black mud of the Negredo. He's greeted by a woman who has white feathery wings covered with peacock eyes, and a crown and a star on her head. And she is an image of divine wisdom, or Sophia, or the Shekinah. She holds the red robe which symbolizes the rubido, or final stage of alchemy, and the new regenerated consciousness. Her yellow sleeve hints at the gold of the final stage. And all around this painting are flowers and birds and animals that are part of the divine unity of life. This image also goes back to the Egyptian mysteries of Osiris, reborn as the grain from the mud of the Nile. So the feminine image of divine wisdom as the Holy Spirit is the presiding image of alchemy. This is the only place in European theology or mythology where we find the divine feminine, apart from the Virgin Mary. And the origin of this may come from the goddess cultures of the lunar era or from the wisdom texts of the Bible, where wisdom speaks as the Holy Spirit and offers the bread of understanding and the water of wisdom to man. The feminine archetype at its highest level has always been associated with nature and with soul, not soul in a personal sense, but soul as the great cosmic sea of being. The alchemists kept alive this ancient concept of soul and took the image of divine wisdom as their guide. They knew her to be a living force, an active presence, pouring out the waters of love and illumination onto humanity. Alchemists who were Kabbalists knew her as the Shekinah, the bride of God and the divine ground of creation. So for many centuries in a European culture that was deeply repressive of the soul and the feminine, alchemy and Kabbalah secretly carried the image of this disowned aspect of the divine. And perhaps this is why Jung's closest colleague, Marie-Louise von Franz, says in her introduction to an alchemical text called the Aurora Consurgens, or Rising Dawn, alchemy lays upon man the task and confers upon him the dignity of rescuing the hidden feminine aspect of God from imprisonment in matter and reuniting her with the manifest masculine deity. So when the alchemists painted these extraordinary and beautiful images, they were working hand in hand with spirit to fix spirit in this dimension of experience with the very considerable artistic skills they had. The very act of devotion to this work, communicating with every brushstroke with the subtle fields of the soul, developed their insight, and this is how the white stone and the lunar queen were constellated within them. I found this when I was working on my book for so many years, that the intensity of the work, I really felt I was working with a whole field that I couldn't see that were helping me in all sorts of ways. They brought me to books, they brought me to sayings, to men and women in the past. All kinds of help was given to me. So here we have the lunar queen, the first appearance of the lunar queen. The end of the first phase and the formation of the white stone is illustrated by the retort or vessel which holds the white lunar queen illumined by the sun. At the top of this page, Mercury is sitting in a chariot drawn by two cocks who herald the coming of the dawn, because that was what cocks were known to do in a mystical sense, herald the coming of the dawn. The matter that is being transmuted has now reached a stage of fixation that no fire of passion can destroy. So it's safe, so to speak. It's reached a stage of safety and coagulation. Below, there's a scene showing the flourishing of arts and sciences. So matter has been raised through the first stage of the nigredo and the albedo to a state where it can become the vehicle for the emergence or incarnation of spirit. Part of the work of the albedo is to redeem the body, healing the split between mind and body, becoming aware of the atrocious suffering inflicted on the body throughout the solar era. I think the origin of all negative projections onto the body is the belief that since it has to die, it must be contaminated by sin in some way and is therefore somehow worthless. And I think this is deep, deep within the Christian tradition. A colossal work of healing and transformation is asked for in order that the body and matter, including the bodies of our enemies, are recognized as the living expression of spirit. Reaching ever deeper into the heart of their psychic life that was reflected in the mirror of their retort, the alchemists began to see the unity of everything, how the ground of everything is spirit. They saw that matter is not dead and inert. They felt the aliveness of matter and worked to extricate the spirit hidden within it. They entered into dialogue with it and wept with the wonder and amazement of what they were discovering and understanding. And their growing insight worked a profound transformation of their consciousness, an illumination of their understanding. Little by little, one of them said, and from day to day, he will perceive with his mental eyes and with the greatest joy some sparks of divine illumination. That was a man called Gerhard Dorn. So now we come to the greater work, which is called the Rubedo. This final phase of the Rubedo is about resurrection and transfiguration. It is about becoming aware of the immortal body of light, the starry or celestial body that we may ultimately inhabit after our death. It signifies the union of body, soul, and spirit, and the full radiance of the sun as the symbol of the divine ground of being that the alchemists call the unus mundus, or one world. And the symbols of this stage are the red stone, or the red rose, the divine elixir, the flower of immortality, the quintessential gold, and the phoenix that I showed last night. So the Rubedo signifies the opening of the heart and the release of compassion as a fountain of light flowing towards all life, the earth, and each other. The deep human instinct to heal, nurture, protect, and cherish is embodied in action. The alchemists likened this final stage to the resurrection. They actually showed Christ climbing out of the tomb in some of their pictures, and to the reddening of the sky as the sun rises to the zenith, irradiating and warming the earth. Red gold is the color of the Rubedo, and the red rose and the red stone are symbols of the completion of the great work. And here we come to the young king, who symbolizes the illumined consciousness, which is the red tincture, stone, or universal medicine that has the power to heal all afflictions. And as you continue with your work, all of you, remember this, that you have the power to heal all afflictions in whatever you're doing. You must hold that image and carry it with you. The deep human instinct to heal, nurture, protect, and cherish is embodied in action. The alchemists likened this final stage to the resurrection. So here Luna is riding in a chariot above and has brought forth the fixed red tincture, the universal healing medicine symbolized by the figure of the young king, who stands on an inverted moon and is illumined by the golden rays of the sun. So the white lunar soul that has been prepared all this time is now tinctured with the gold of the rising sun. The stages of the Rubedo are governed by earth and air, no longer fire and water. And these are the 5 stages. They're the coagulatio, which is the bringing together of all the elements, sublimatio, which is connecting with the other dimension, multiplicatio, which is about amplifying all the gifts and compassion that we carry. Fixatio is about fixing them in some kind of work, like writing a book or all the projects that you've got. And conjunctio is about the union, the final union. And they said, we are tried in the fire and rendered into gold. In essence, these phases of the process are about the slow, arduous creation of a new kind of consciousness. One is in the kitchen, transforming basic ingredients into the finished dish, but there is present in the psyche a master chef presiding over one's efforts. This master chef is the self, the new center of consciousness, or the spirit made conscious within oneself, and is overseeing the process of transformation into the finished dish. The mystery of this phase is that spirit is becoming conscious in us, and we become aware of the heaviness and difficulty of representing spirit in the world. It's easy to become discouraged and depressed, or conversely inflated, and to think we can teach others before we've gone some way with the process of transformation ourselves. A marriage is taking place between us and spirit, and is constellating or birthing a new center within us. We have to learn to walk between two worlds, the invisible realm of the subtle body on one hand, and this world on the other, and realize that these two mysteriously interpenetrate and interact with each other. And we become aware of synchronicities. That's one of the signs that you're actually on the right track, is synchronicities happening. So another primary symbol of the libido is the phoenix, symbolizing new life regenerated from the ashes of the old, having passed through the fire of transformation. This final stage signifies the awakening to awareness of spirit as guide and companion within the illumined soul. Do you remember the picture of Tobias and the angel? You have a companion and a guide in this work. Other symbols of the completed work are the quintessential gold, the divine elixir, the flower of immortality, the heavenly balsam, the perfume of flowers, and the celestial blue color, which is the color of the Virgin Mary and the Shekinah. So here, in this beautiful image of the hermaphrodite, the soul of the alchemist has integrated the solar and lunar, conscious and unconscious aspects of his or her being, but also the invisible with the visible dimensions of reality. She holds an egg that contains the colors of the phases of the process, the black of the negredo, the white of the albedo, and the red of the rubedo. These are also reflected in the red and white wings and the black body. The man wears a solar halo and the woman a lunar one. The mirror in the center reflects the surrounding landscape, which is also the inner landscape of the soul. The landscape within and without the mirror is tinctured with gold, and birds and flowers adorn the frame. As they watch the matter of their psychic life transform in the mirror of the alchemical retort, the alchemists experienced the immense mystery of what they were witnessing and experiencing. They realized that they were assisting spirit in the evolutionary effort of bringing itself to consciousness over eons of earth time, 4.5 billion years of earth time, leading its creation back to the source. They had revealed to them in a gradual process of illumination the innate divinity of nature and all life processes, and they saw that one divine spirit was at work in all the forms of life and in human consciousness as well. They sought to bring to birth in themselves the hidden spirit that longed to be rescued from its buried state, and in accomplishing this double act of redemption, they became the sons of divine wisdom, inheritors of the true philosophical gold. And this is the true meaning of the word philosopher, which means lover of wisdom. And the alchemists became the ministers, not the masters of the stone, their lives illumined and guided by the Holy Spirit, eternally pouring forth the water of life. So here we see, coming near the end now, Sol and Luna as glorified bodies, surrounded by a circle of stars. The small circle symbolizes the completed stone. The square symbolizes the completion of the 4 stages and the ability of the stone to manifest in the world. And this is what we're all at the stage of doing, trying to manifest this into the world. The large triangle signifies the union of the Trinity of body, soul, and spirit. And the circle of stars signifies the connection to the cosmic ground. As a triune whole, Sol and Luna are united in the sacred marriage with the divine ground of being. So this is my sort of drawing of how I see this connection between the two dimensions. No one, the alchemist said, may accomplish this work except through humility and love, to return to the ground from which we have come, so completing our evolutionary journey on this planet and bringing the consciousness of the planet with us is one of the most exciting quests that I can imagine. To discover that spirit, so long projected onto a God remote from ourselves and creation, is the quintessential consciousness awaiting discovery, both in nature and within our nature, is one of the greatest revelations it is possible to experience. The other revelation, no less overwhelming, is that we have the extraordinary privilege of helping this divine consciousness to achieve its evolutionary goal. In awakening to our soul, in discovering how to relate to it, transform it, heal its wounds, listen to its guidance, receive its dreams, and reflect on its visions, we help to bring about that conscious marriage with the ground of life, which I believe is the tremendous destiny of the human race. So here again is that beautiful image of the alchemical wedding with a woman and a man who represent the lunar and solar energies of the cosmos, holding the chalice of the Grail. Alchemy is the Western tradition of inner psychic transformation. It is a feminine mystery, a mystery of the soul. It is not about achieving perfection, but about achieving wholeness. The symbols yield their secret to those who contemplate them. The process of transformation is unique for each one of us, yet intrinsically the same for all. This is the slow creation of the wondrous stone, the vision of the Holy Grail, the healing with the alchemical gold. This invisible yet immanent Holy Spirit is the flow of life in our veins, the flux and flow of our thoughts, the power, the huge power of our instincts, the miracle of our bodily processes, and the creative genius of our imagination. It is the blazing revelation of the divinity of life in the reunion of body, soul, and spirit, and the service of that life with whatever creative gifts it has bestowed on us. The gradual creation of the treasure is an experience of great suffering and sacrifice on the one hand, and illumination, wonder, and inexpressible joy on the other, as the light of the unified consciousness dawns. Now, Teilhard wrote this beautiful statement. He said, "The way out for the world, the gates of the future, the entry into the superhuman, will not open to some privileged few or a single people, elect among all peoples. They will yield only to the thrust of all together in the direction where all can rejoin and complete one another in a spiritual renewal of the earth." And then I have the quote that I gave you last night from Aurobindo, which has been my guide, actually. He wrote an enormous book called The Life Divine, which has been like a Bible to me, in which he gives the whole process of the evolution of consciousness in it. And I found this sentence years ago: "If it be true that spirit is involved in matter and apparent nature is secret God, then the manifestation of the divine in himself and the realization of God within and without are the highest and most legitimate aim possible to man on earth." So I'm ending with this picture on the cover of my book. The final stage of alchemy and the completion of the great work give rise to a state of consciousness that unites the solar and lunar ways of knowing in a third state that the alchemists called stellar consciousness. The Egyptian alchemists called this final state living in truth. And in the view of the alchemists, we are all treading the path of return to the stars. Because at the quantum level we're all connected, when thousands of us begin to change our consciousness, millions are affected through that ground. I believe that we can heal the terrible errors our beliefs have created. We can choose whether to continue in these beliefs or to live and act from a different relationship with life. As we do so, we would begin to align ourselves with the luminous ground of reality. Our minds would serve the deepest longing of our hearts and the deepest wisdom of our soul. We would transmit the light and love flowing from this ground. We would know who we are and why we are here, and we would begin to bring into being the dream of the cosmos.